What's up, everybody, and welcome to Scouting the Fins. I am your co-host, Hussam Patel, and this show is brought to you by ThompsonCigar.com. Make sure you guys are using the promo code 3yards20 for 20% off of your order of $75 or more. Once again, that's 3yards20 for 20% off your order of $75 or more on ThompsonCigar.com. All right, we'll be welcoming our other co-hosts of the show, Eric and Coach Smith. Guys, how we doing today?
Doing well. Excited to take a look at some of the free agent offensive line options. I know a lot of people have been clamoring for some good old offensive line talk for the Dolphins. So happy to give the people what they want tonight.
Of course. And Coach, I know you did a lot of extensive film review on the free agent guards and offensive tackles as well. And who are some of the people we'll be talking about today?
We're gonna have a few different ones. Patrick Mekari is one that we're gonna talk about. Aaron Banks, a few other guys as well. And this type of show that I love, of course. I mean, if we're going to be talking offensive line, then that's what I love to do, pretty much all day, every day. So to get the chance to be here and talk to you guys about that today is exciting.
Of course, it is. So, first of all, before we even get to a little bit of the film dive and a little bit of the review, the Dolphins' current guards are Liam Eichenberg and Robert Jones. And it's a pretty big hot topic, after the Dolphins lost Robert Hunt to almost $100 million in free agency, and Isaiah Wynn couldn't even get back up until week 16, week 17 of the season. The run game pretty much took a nosedive, and it wasn't just the play of the offensive guards, but, Coach, we did take a look at what some of the other perimeter skill players were doing. And Eric, the consensus seemed to be that the offensive line isn't good enough. And admittedly, it wasn't good enough because of a couple of factors, which I just mentioned. But just reviewing Liam and Robert Jones, Coach, do you think they'll be back next season?
I can see a scenario where at least one of them returns. They like them. They like Rob Jones. They like Liam Eichenberg. I think they really bet on the continued development of them to be better than what they were in 2023. And I still feel, had everything else gone right, had Julian Hill developed the way that they had hoped, had Austin Jackson and Teron Armstead stayed healthy, it probably would have been good enough. But 2024 was, they didn't make that next step. Rob Jones and Liam Eichenberg didn't make that next step. Isaiah Wynn didn't return to the lineup until late in the season, and then the other stuff happened as well. So it was kind of a proof of concept that didn't work to really skimp on the guards. And as we head into 2025, I think that the fans, the coaches, and everybody's in agreement that it's time to see some improvement, specifically at the guard positions.
Yeah, apologies there, man. I think ultimately you're looking at a situation where I would say there's almost no chance both are back. I tend to agree that one of those guys is going to be back. And as much as Dolphins fans don't want to hear it, if this isn't what I would do per se, but I think if you're looking at a guy that's more likely to be back, I would probably say it's Liam Eichenberg, just because they've invested more into him. Obviously, with him being a second round draft pick. I think Isaiah Wynn has a good shot of coming back next year. I'd be amenable to it, certainly. I think he's a good depth piece along the interior of the line. I'm not of the impression that, the Dolphins need 3 starters along the line here. I think you can do very well with, a guy that you maybe spend premium resources on. One guy you're going to spend on him, whether that's a, day 2 draft pick or whether that's a salary in that $10 to $12 million a year range. And then one guy that's kind of a competition piece with the two other guards that you have on the roster.
Right. They might spend, a premium asset on the offensive line, maybe a first or second round pick, but this is a free agency primer type of show. We're continuing our free agency show, and we'll be taking a look at some of these prospects. The first big one, which the name is being pretty much thrown around, is Arizona Cardinals offensive guard, pretty much offensive lineman, Will Hernandez, number 76 on the Arizona Cardinals. He's a very, very big dude, very muscular dude too. I believe he was drafted by the New York Giants and has played about 86% of his career snaps. Now, not 100%. We would all love for this guy to be an Iron Man, play 100%, but let's take a look at the fat coach. I mean, this offensive line position is very, very physical. It demands a lot, and it's kind of rare for a lot of offensive linemen to play 16 games. I mean, you take a look at all-pro tackle Penei Sewell. He missed a couple of games this last season as well. Teron Armstead recently has missed a lot of games as well. But for Dolphins fans, Liam Eichenberg hasn't missed a lot of games with injuries either, and he's the Dolphins' current Iron Man right now.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to a combination of things, right? You hear the phrase "the best of it" or "best ability is availability," and obviously Liam Eichenberg has had that. But there's also the factor of the skill within the system. I think is a big factor as well. And then you come into cost. So the struggle here is to find where those three things meet, where you find players that are good players that are able to stay on the field, and you find a way that they fit, into the salary cap. You can obviously go out there and you can pick out the best two guards that you feel there are in free agency and say you could fix it that way, but that's not feasible, money-wise. And when you look at the impact that the guard position really has on a roster overall, there's certainly a case against, signing those $20 million guards, like we let Rob Hunt walk like that. It's tough to stomach, but at the same time, the impact that you're getting for $20 million a year at the guard position, doesn't generally, add up. So it is important to find somebody that's going to stay on the field, but it's also important to find, the guys that you can afford and the guys that can play well within your system.
Yeah, but just taking a look at his current contract, Eric, he's kind of cheap. Pretty recently, he only got paid $3.1 million in his base salary with a 1.25 prorated signing bonus. Now, if he is a hot commodity this free agency, I think people are going to pay a little bit more than that, maybe $7 to $8 million a year. But over the cap, his valuation is $2.1 million per year. Now, I do think the Dolphins should be able to stomach that. However, Coach pretty much says that, is this going to be the best scheme fit? Now, we know that Mike McDaniel's offense is obviously outside zone. Will Hernandez, he hasn't played in a lot of outside zone, but the Arizona Cardinals have changed up a lot of things recently. Their offensive coordinator is Drew Petzing, has a mix of outside zone and inside zone as well. What are your thoughts on that?
So I would say the one thing that impresses me the most with a Will Hernandez is if you actually take a look back, and this has been a big thing in Mike McDaniel's offenses going back in a few years, he has not committed a false start penalty in 35 games. And pre-snap penalties have been a killer for this offense. Granted, I don't know how much motion the Cardinals are doing in comparison to the Dolphins. So there might be a few, mitigating factors as far as that goes. The other thing there with Will Hernandez is I kind of worry about his lateral quickness. He's definitely, if I have 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, he's definitely the guy that I would probably want there to run behind, just straight up. but in terms of getting to the outside, I just don't know how much of a fit Will Hernandez would be in terms of his ability to get out in space in this offense.
Now, Coach, he's not the best schematic fit, and he's not as athletic enough to get up to the second level. We do know that the Dolphins, quote unquote, as we've mentioned before, want to get to outside zone, want to run to outside zone. But you got to take a look at some of the philosophy that's changing in the NFL with Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan. Obviously, Kyle Shanahan is staunch in his scheme. Sean McVay pretty much figured out that, hey, he needs to adapt, he needs to evolve his offense. And they got big boys at the guard position, very, powerful maulers that didn't really fit the mold of the Shanahan McVay scheme. And they went from an outside zone scheme to a mix of, inside zone, outside zone, and gap as well. Do you think this, if the Dolphins are to go after Will Hernandez, that Mike McDaniel is evolving his scheme?
So if they would go after Hernandez, I think that would signal a move in that direction. I feel like Will Hernandez, there's a lot of talk about that philosophy of McVay switching to more of the inside zone stuff. And I think that Will Hernandez fits very well there. But like Eric said, his lateral quickness, his ability to, sustain those blocks on the move going horizontal is not the best, and probably is not a great fit in the outside zone type system. I feel that McDaniel was probably a lot more ingrained in that Shanahan system, where McVay kind of branched off from Kyle more than Mike McDaniel did. So I don't know that they're going to move in that direction. I don't know if they should move in that direction. I mean, I know that that's the popular thing right now, but when you look at adding a guy like Aaron Brewer last year, like if you're going over an inside zone, then that's not going to be the strength of a guy that played really well for you. If you're still going to, obviously we don't want to see Achane, running up the middle as much as he did this year, but if that's still going to be your main back, then, inside zone's not your fit with that. So I don't see them moving in that direction, but if they would go after a Will Hernandez, then that is definitely a signal that that's the way that they're going.
All right, the next guy up on our list is San Francisco 49ers guard Aaron Banks, teammate of Leon Eichenberg's at Notre Dame. And somehow Dolphins fans say that we drafted the worst Notre Dame offensive lineman of them all. Aaron Banks was taken later on. He was taken after Liam Eichenberg by the San Francisco 49ers. And Dolphins fans aren't going to like this, but he was hurt this year and he was put on IR. And they're going to say that, of course, they're going to go after this guy. This is a Chris Greer staple, injured players, injured offensive lineman. This is the Miami Dolphins guy. Eric, is this the Miami Dolphins guy? And do you think that they'll try to go after him?
He very well might be the Miami Dolphins guy. I think that there might be a couple mitigating factors there. Firstly, as you mentioned, the injury. Secondly, the price tag. He's definitely going to be closer towards that upper echelon. Obviously, Trey Smith is kind of in a stratosphere by himself, and then it's going to be the other guys like an Aaron Banks. The big advantage of getting an Aaron Banks is he knows the scheme right away. There is very little adjustment period that has to be done with a guy like Banks. The drawbacks there are with a lot of guards in a Shanahan system, and Coach has a great series right now on his YouTube channel, kind of breaking down these things. The play strength just isn't always there with those guys, and in short yardage, that's just not what Dolphins fans are going to want to hear. But you're not going to be able to get everything you want all the time with these guys.
And Coach, your thoughts on Banks?
Yeah, so echoing a lot of the same of that, in all the guards I've looked at, that is a common theme. I think that may be more of a perception thing from fans that, there are these linemen just walking around out there that you can line up in short yardage and they're just going to blow guys off the ball like you look at on a high school roster. And that's just not really reality in the NFL. As far as Aaron Banks specifically, I mean, obviously he's in a Shanahan system today. I think that he fits a lot of what they are looking for in terms of a guard. He is a bit of a wide body type player. He's a pretty sturdy player, but yet still has that short area quickness. And that's something that we talked about with Robert Jones before, that, he's not the most athletic, but when you talk about quickness in a phone booth and his ability to cut off a first level defender and to, get his hips around, that's something that he does, pretty well. So I look at Aaron Banks is the same style of player as what Robert Jones is, but he is a much better version of that.
Yep, he's more so of a better scheme fit. He has experience. He's athletic enough. He's nimble enough. But you got to take a look at how much you're actually going to pay him, since he's going to be coming off injured reserve and he's going to be coming off injury. OTC has his valuation right now in between 4.25 APY to 5.9 APY per year. And if, the Dolphins were to do a standard 3 or 4 year contract, that's 15 to 20 million. Now, that seems on the low end for a guard, but there are a lot of teams that need offensive linemen. So I feel like that is going to be inflated. I feel like if the Dolphins and Chris Greer were to go and grab Aaron Banks, they have to take a look at some of his short yardage situationals and see if he can actually help out. Taking a look at his film here up against the New York Giants, he's the left guard. This is his 2023 film that I'm looking at. It's a 3rd and 1, 3rd and short. Holding it up, Christian McCaffrey is able to bounce outside for a 12-yard gain on 3rd and 1. So this obviously does bode well in short yardage situations. It may be a key solve, but it's pretty much going to come down to the money. The Dolphins also have the 4th least amount of money in terms of cap space. So they're going to have to see how it's pretty much going to work out. They're going to need to figure out a way on how to figure out the cash. Brandon Shore is pretty much going to have to make sure the books are clean in order to get after one or maybe both of these guards. Speaking of cash, guys, Underdog Fantasy is the best place to cash in on all your takes during the playoffs. Which players are going off and which ones are ice cold. Obviously, we have the AFC and NFC championship games happening this weekend. So go ahead and head on over to Underdog Fantasy and see how much you can win. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. With their pick'em game, you could win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on player stats, yards, touchdowns, interceptions, and much, much more. Underdog is the only pick'em platform that puts the power to cash out in your hands. Now you can either keep riding with your entry or tap the Win Now button to cash out whenever you want. Every dog deserves a second chance, and with Underdog Rescues, you can get your money back and receive a promo if an early injury causes your entry to lose. Underdog is the best place to play pick'em. Download the Underdog app today and use promo code 3YARDS, that's 3WARDS, to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Higher or lower, you make the call on Underdog.
Be 18 plus, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 19 plus in Alabama, New England, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE NY or text Hope NY to 467369. Must be 8.
All right. As we move on from the top 2 guards that we're looking at in terms of schematic and money and who may be one of the top targets, Mekhi Becton of the Philadelphia Eagles is going to be playing this weekend as the left guard in the NFC Championship game. But he is not the strongest offensive lineman on that Eagles team. Coach, is Becton a fit for this Dolphins team?
I am not a fan of Becton as a fit in for the Dolphins. I feel like you said he's not the best lineman on the Eagles. I think he is clearly the fifth best. I think that he is covered up in a lot of ways by the linemen around him, the scheme, and of course Saquon Barkley running behind him. Being the massive human being that he is, he does end up with some, highlight type plays that you'll see him bowling over a linebacker. There was the big run last week where the linebacker was essentially bailing out and Becton gets his hands on him and knocks him down. Great play, but it's a linebacker that's going backward. I think it was overblown in my opinion. And when you really go back and you watch him from play to play, you see a lot of the same issues that he had at tackle, which is he plays too high. He doesn't move well laterally. So maybe there could still be some growth from him as a guard. But I don't see him as the type of player that can come into Miami and be a whole lot better than what we have with the guards right now.
Yeah, and you say if he's the fifth best offensive lineman on that team and he's being carried by Saquon Barkley, Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson, Cam Jurgens, and everyone else, then he seems like he's going to be a liability on this Dolphins offensive line. Eric, if you replace one of Liam Eichenberg and Robert Jones with Mekhi Becton, are you really even replacing or are you getting worse in this situation?
I don't necessarily think you're getting worse, but I don't think you're getting better either. It's kind of a lateral move in the sense that it would feel like a move just for the sake of making a move. You watch him in run blocking situations, and I look at Mekhi Becton and I think to myself, every rep looks like pass protection. Every single rep. He's just holding his ground. He's not a people mover. He doesn't. It's granted there he is 5 yards downfield, but 85% of his reps he's just holding his ground. Which, again, in pass protection sets that's fine, but I don't see the ability to really move his guy. He's actually not even moving anybody there, but I don't see the ability for him to move guys. He's not necessarily getting pushed backwards, but he's also not pushing anybody forward. And in a system like this, where it's dependent on you being able to get outside and really kind of take the block to the defenders, I don't see it with Mekhi Becton in this offense.
Money-wise, he's probably going to be really, really cheap. He just signed a 1-year, $2.75 million deal with the Eagles. He didn't really play that well for the Jets. He was more so as the right tackle. He's a big dude, right? 6'7", almost 370 pounds. Not that good of a mover as we're seeing on film. He didn't play the best, even though the Jets under their offense was pretty similar to the Shanahan, McDaniel, McVay type of tree, and he didn't really fit in that well. Now, money-wise, if he's going to be your swing tackle or backup, it'll make sense, or he can pinch in for a game or two. But as a starter, I really don't think Mekhi Becton is the way to go. People are going to be fascinated by just his sheer size. Pass protection-wise, yes, it may work, but run blocking, that's what the Dolphins really need to get back into. That's what they really need help with. Like, they need to get back to being top 10 in the run, and that's going to help the offense tremendously. Coach, if you were to take a flyer on Mekhi Becton, not as a starter, but what about as a backup?
I mean, he has that position experience. I mean, he's played tackle in the NFL. He's played guard in the NFL. So, if you talked about being able to get two other starters and we're not returning any of the guys that we had this year and you're looking for somebody else to come in as a cheap backup that, maybe has room to develop. Like I said, he's only played guard for a year. So there is still room for improvement theoretically. So I would not be opposed to him being the third or fourth guard if we're just doing a complete overhaul of the room.
Now, the next guy we're going to talk about is Kansas City Chiefs two-time Super Bowl winning champion Trey Smith out of Tennessee. Pre-draft, I really thought he wouldn't fit in Kansas City. He was too big of a guy, wouldn't be able to move that well up to the second level. But that's not what this Chiefs offense is about. These guys are downhill, powerful. They are going to maul you. Now, if the Dolphins are actually going to be evolving, changing up their scheme, he seems like a pretty good fit, wouldn't you say, Coach?
Oh, here we go.
Here we go. This is what I like to hear.
So Trey Smith is a very good player. We talked earlier, right, about the NFL is not somewhere that you can just go up there and line up with, guys one-on-one and kick ass and that type of thing. And Trey Smith is that dude. Like, Trey Smith will get out there and get after that, and he will move a defensive tackle one-on-one. The flip side of that is that when we look at Trey Smith compared to some of these other guards that are available, there are also some really ugly losses in that film. Again, it gets overshadowed because you get the highlight plays. He's all over Sports Center, all over social media. But there are some ugly losses from Trey Smith. I also don't think the Chiefs scheme really shows him well in the outside zone stuff like Miami is expected to be able to run. And, from a talent perspective, right, I don't want to sit here and say that Trey Smith can't come in and can't learn to run the outside zone scheme. But when you look at the contract that he's probably going to get, right, if Rob Hunt got $20 million last year, there's a good chance that Trey Smith is going to top that. And if I'm going to look at a guard making over $20 million a year, I personally am not going to have it be somebody who's going to come in that I have to teach how to run outside zone. So I just don't feel like the scheme fit is there compared to the contract that Trey Smith is likely going to get for him to fit into the Dolphins offense.
Eric, the contract valuation for Trey Smith right now is about $12.1 million a year. With the salary cap inflation and with not a lot of top offensive line hitting free agency, do you see the Chiefs paying him top dollar to stay in Kansas City, or do you think he's going to go to a team like Miami that may throw money, or another team that may throw money at this, whether or not he's going to an outside zone team or not?
Yeah, I think you can, past performance predicts what's going to happen in the future. And I think with organizations, you can kind of use that precedent as well. The Chiefs, at a certain point, I don't think that they're going to pay him. I think Trey Smith is going to end up going to the highest bidder because, let's be honest, truth be told, you only get so many of these opportunities as a player to get this kind of a payday. And so I can't see him passing up a payday, and I can't see Kansas City being the team that's going to say, okay, yeah, we'll match that $18 million a year salary. It just hasn't been the Chiefs' MO. They let go of L'Jarius Sneed. They let go of Tyreek Hill. They plug and play guys around Patrick Mahomes, and that's how they operate.
Yeah. If the Dolphins were to pay him big top dollar, I would question and say, if they were paying big top dollar for a guy like Trey Smith, why couldn't they prioritize Robert Hunt? Albeit still they have cap issues, salary cap issues, and they need to get under the books before they even hit free agency. I'm taking a look at this film review right here. It's fourth quarter up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they are tied 17-17 with 9 minutes and 36 seconds left in the fourth quarter, and they're midfield. They just need to run the ball. They just need to get 1 yard, coach. All right. Vita Vea is lined up on Trey Smith's outside shoulder. Mano a mano, he might be one of those guys that can hold his ground pretty well and be able to run behind. We're going to run this play once Vita Vea is going to try and power and bulldoze him. But what happens is that Trey Smith is able to get a combo block from Chiefs number 74. The combo block is there. It opens up the hole on the A gap. Smith releases Vita Vea, gets up to the second level, and he pretty much blocks Levante David, who was going to go ahead and make that tackle for Carson Steele. And Carson Steele is able to get that 1 yard, even though Vita Vea overpowers number 74 and tackles him. You need 1 yard. You need that short yardage guy. Trey Smith is him. But if they're going to consistently run outside zone, they're going to have a lot of those motions. Coach brings up a good point. Are you really going to have to reteach someone about it? We have a couple of good questions in the chat coming along. Indade is saying, are y'all considering Brewer's strengths and weaknesses and types of guards that he would need on both sides? Coach, this is a fantastic question for you.
Yeah, I think that is a big question. We talk about some of the other guards, not necessarily the guys that we've looked at today, but some of the other guards available in free agency. You find other guys that are not as strong at the point of attack, and I think that those are the guys that you want to stay away from, because you don't want, Aaron Brewer is a explosive guy. He's a quick guy, but when we talk about just the ability to root out those 0 or 1 technique defensive tackles, that's not a strength of his, and we don't want to put a guard beside him that's going to struggle in those same areas. And at the same time, like we talked about earlier, the reasons that I don't think that McDaniel is going to go to a inside zone heavy type scheme. So if we're going to, if I'm right and they're going to stick towards the outside zone stuff, you can't just put a big slug in there beside Aaron Brewer that's just gonna try to muscle guys. You've still got to get a guard in there that has the ability to win with those first 2-3 step quickness and get into position. So there's definitely a combination of things that you need to look at there. But I do think that when you're committed to Aaron Brewer as your center, that has to factor into what you're looking at with the guards as well.
All right, as we move on from Trey Smith, we are going to take a look at Patrick Mekari from the Baltimore Ravens. Eric, he has the fantastic benefit of having arguably 2 of the best rushers in the NFL, and one of them is a quarterback in Lamar Jackson. The other one is King Derrick Henry. Taking a look at Patrick Mekari, what are your initial thoughts of him? Do you think he fits inside Miami?
So I think Patrick Mekari would be a very good fit overall in terms of, we talked about having that guy that has that strength that maybe an Aaron Brewer doesn't have to defeat some of those, 1 or 0 techniques defensive linemen, but also has that ability and that quickness to get to the outside in the outside zone. And I think that he's one of the guys that's probably the best fits for that. He would definitely, I have him probably 2 or 3 on my wish list. Patrick Mekari would be a fantastic fit in this offense.
Taking a look at his potential contract valuation, his career earnings is almost $18 million. He has around $3 million APY. He signed as a UDFA, coach. May hit free agency if Baltimore decides not to bring him back. I got a feeling Baltimore will pretty much bring him back. He's a hometown guy. He's a homegrown guy. He received an extension in 2021, about $5.1 million per year, $15.45 million contract valuation. I think he's going to be paid a little bit more if he were to hit the open market, but you got to take a look and see his situation. He's got Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. Does that factor into your evaluation of him?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the things that was interesting. I have him as my top guard available in free agency. But watching the Ravens run outside zone was different than watching other teams do it. And I do think that having Derrick Henry being your lead back has a lot to do with that. We look at, teams like the Dolphins and the 49ers that are running it. You're really trying to get a lot more movement from the linemen as they're, running through those combo blocks and climbing to the second level. When you look at the way that the Ravens run that outside zone stuff, it's more so they're just trying to almost mirror a defender. They're not really looking to sink their hips and drive the way that other teams are. I think a big part of that is that, if you look at the Dolphins and you got Devon Achane, you need the line to create that movement. If you have Derrick Henry, that's who creates the movement. You just have to, get on a body and make it so it's an arm tackle that's running through. So I do think that the scheme, definitely helps them there. You mentioned him likely going back. I think that'll depend on cost. The Ravens are one of the best teams when it comes to rebuilding those offensive lines from the inside. I mean, you got, Stanley's at left tackle was drafted. Rosengarten took over from Mekari at right tackle, also drafted. You got Falele was drafted. Mekari was a free agent, and Linderbaum was a draft pick as well. So that entire line is homegrown, and it wouldn't surprise me if they have actually they do. They have Ben Cleveland, who, he played against us and played well. So it's not like they don't have guys in-house where they have to go out and, give Mekari a big contract to stay there.
Yeah, and you're right about how they operate and how they run. Pulling this film up as well. Fourth quarter, 2 minutes and 27 seconds left. The Baltimore Ravens are trailing. They are nearby midfield. They're at the 37-yard line. 3rd and 1 in this game. Their running back is not Derrick Henry. Their running back is Justice Hill in this situation, right? We're going to go ahead and run the play right here. The left guard is Patrick Mekari, right next to Ronnie Stanley. And the run play is a pretty much simple inside zone type of play out of shotgun. Number 94, the Cincinnati Bengals, is lined up right over Mekari's head, and he's going to block him. He gets a double combo block from the center, Tyler Linderbaum, just puts his hands on him and is going to move up towards the second level, and he's just mirroring him. You said it yourself, Coach. He's mirroring him. He tries to get his hands on him, but doesn't necessarily make that block because he's under the assumption, hey, maybe this is Derrick Henry. Maybe Lamar is going to be pulling this one as well. Obviously, it's an inside zone, but you have Justice Hill on the field. If this was Devon Achane, Mekari needs to get his hands and open up that hole. And Achane pretty much right here, you can see Coach and Eric. This is a pretty big hold if he were to hold up and grab it. And Hill gets tackled for a 2-3 yard gain on 3rd and 1. All right. The next one is Teven Jenkins. And in my pre-draft evaluation, I actually really liked him, and I really wanted the Dolphins to draft him back in 2021 to protect Tua. Obviously, he had a little bit of injury concerns coming out of Oklahoma State. Didn't play well his rookie season, and he got to play behind Caleb Williams. Eric, initial thoughts on Jenkins. How far or how high does he actually rank on your list?
He is the guy for me. He is
really?
Yes, Teven Jenkins is the guy for me. And it's, I just, number one, I'm in love with the tools. You're talking about a guy that's 6'6", has insane play strength, and you see it on film. He also plays with a lot of nasty. He will chase defenders down. Love that about him. And then the other thing is he uses, so he's got 33-inch arms, which isn't great for a tackle. But they're pretty good for a guard. And you'll actually see him use that length in the run game. And then on top of that, I think he's also very fundamentally sound with his footwork. You very rarely see him off balance on a lot of in many snaps. So I mean, Teven Jenkins, I think in this scheme, I think the Dolphins would be able to unlock his best self, and I think he's probably the highest ceiling guy. Granted, he does have a lower floor than a couple of these guys, but I think he's easily the highest ceiling guy on the list.
Coach?
I agree with everything that Eric said. For a long time, I did have Teven Jenkins as my top guard, so I don't disagree with that. I would say that what not necessarily knocked Jenkins down, but what pushed Mekari and Banks above him, I have Jenkins at number 3 right now, is the consistency. Like Eric said, like the tools are there. He has some of my favorite reps in outside zone, just getting out there, kicking ass and blocking. He does still have some ugly losses in his film as well. I think that's where Mekari and Banks don't have those type of reps. But when you talk about, exactly what Eric said, the high ceiling is there with Jenkins. It's just that floor might be a little lower with him compared to Banks and Mekari for me. But Jenkins was my number 1 guard for a while, so I completely get where Eric's coming from with that.
Yep, Jenkins is coming off a rookie contract. We'll see if Chicago does extend him as well. It looks like he might be coming in over around $10 to $12 million a year as well. So we're gonna see if Miami spends big money on a guard along with a premium asset as well in the draft. Make sure you guys go ahead and stick with us here on Scouting the Fins, part of the 3 yards per carry podcast, also part of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We will have more of our free agency primer as well. Next week, we will be talking about the pass catchers, the tight ends, and wide receivers. See who the Dolphins may be able to shell out some money to as well. Thank you guys for listening and watching. Go Fins, baby.